Well, yeah. So I've been working on this thing for about a year now. It's worked up quite a tremendous bill, but whatever. I've nothing much to do around, so. Anyways, this is a 2007 RMZ 250, but it has a 5-valve Yamaha engine on it. And I guess the main topic on that would be, how does it fit in the frame? You can see that there's the bolt right there. That's a Yamaha bolt that the dealership sold me, but I specifically asked them for the Suzuki bolt, but they did not sell me the Suzuki bolt. They sold me the Yamaha bolt, so I had to extend it with a piece of 1/2-inch threaded rod. Welded that with a 3/32 7018 welding rod in a very particular manner, so it works fine. And then the 3/4-inch bolt on the end of that is locked on there with some thread locker. I actually need a breaker bar to take that nut off. And the guy I bought the frame from on this thing, the swing arm bearings were completely seized out. He tried getting them out with a air chisel or something, messed the fucking bearings up. But there's a little trick for getting the bearings out of the swing arms, and it's as easy as tapping a hammer on the end of a fucking stick a couple times. And then to get the carburetor from the Suzuki to fit on there, I actually bent the choke lever forward about maybe 10 degrees, and then the carburetor barely clears the float bowl on the chain tensioner there. And then about a couple months after I got this thing running and stuff, pissed around on it for a while, and then one of the intake valves dropped into the fucking cylinder and chewed up the piston and stuff. So I pulled it apart and put a bunch of steel valves in it, though it does not have the heavier valve springs. But the cam timing has been modified so that the steel valves work without the steel valve heavier springs, I'm not going into that. You actually have to go to school to learn that, how to do that, but some people just tell stuff. But it's complicated. Some people understand it, some people don't. But there's also a fan right here. That's a computer fan, and it's tied to a relay that turns on when the engine's running, and there's a 12-volt battery that powers it. Along with the lighting system, there's a 12-volt battery that's charged off the stator, and there's actually I had to look up the wiring diagram for this thing, and then I figured out which wire it was off of this cable here that comes out there. One of the wires that's the same color as 3 other wires. But that one wire that's the same color as 3 other wires in this output right here, you can tap a 1.5 amp or a 3 amp power converter to that, and you can get a 12-volt from that. And it's a whichever coil it is. Doesn't really matter if I say it's kind of technical stuff, but yeah, And then The factory coil stator that's on this thing is not the high output one, it's just the regular one they come with. And there's another airplane in the sky. Where I live, there's lots of planes going around all the time. This explains why I get gas for this thing. Same place I get airplane gas. And then, okay, so then the whatchamacallit right there, to fit the carburetor on this thing was kind of meticulous, because it's held on with a doubled up hose clamp right there, and then it bottoms out on the back end and hits the shock a little bit. But you know, it's self-clearances. Got a little charger. It has a little charging thing in it. Right there you can see the box. Light focuses. Yeah, and there's the charger or whatever. Up in there, there's a little charger. Yeah, there's the tail end of it. There's a little charger packed right there on the top of the cylinder. There's the plug for it right here. It's a little corroded. But to get the gas tank to fit from the Suzuki to clear the Yamaha cylinder head, because it's about, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches taller on the Yamaha, I had to take a heat gun and push up the bottom of the gas tank so that the petcock right there would clear the cylinder head. So then the shut-off valve is tucked up. The fuel shut-off valve is tucked up in behind the frame, about like right there. So it's kind of hard to reach to. And there's another shut-off valve right there. And yeah, there's a little switch right there that turns on the indicator lights. It's got the flashing, or not the flashing, the white lights behind a red brick right here. Bicycle. And then the turn signals for this came off of a listing off of one website called Amazon. Same with those. Same with the key switch there. A bunch of the wire I salvaged out of a scrapped car. It's got a headlight on it with an LED in it. Those LED headlights are pretty freaking bright. And it has a big horn on it here from a salvaged car. As well as the exhaust here on it. It has the exhaust from the Suzuki, which happened to be a titanium exhaust. So I made an adapter right there so that the exhaust would fit on it. And then the radiator hose right there has a bit less than a 1/4 inch of clearance. I actually had to pull out the rubber shims on the radiator so I could push it up so that it would clear that. And plastic on it right there is touching the exhaust, so it's melted a little bit. But then the plastics on this thing was sanded and sprayed with that whatchamacallit stuff, the duplicolor whatchamacallit paint, lacquer paint. So the paint on this thing is actual paint, it's not vinyl decals. It's that duplicolor paint that has a fiber strand reinforcement in it. And like put a bunch of enough clear coat on it, it flexes pretty nice and doesn't crack. Drove it around when it was about -30 a couple of times, and around the temperature of -30 the stupid color paint gets pretty brittle, and that's why it's all cracked up. Driving around when it was really cold out. And then this thing has what are they called? Duro, D-U-R-O tires on it. They're made in a imperial standard measurement, so they're not a metric tire, but those ones work very good. And then with the rim lock on these wheels, I managed to get some automotive wheel weights and just epoxied those to the opposing side on the rims. And there's the one on the front there. They're epoxied to the rim just to counter the wheel weights. And if you epoxy wheel weights to counterbalance for a wheel rim lock, you just put the exact amount of weight on the opposite side that's the same as the weight of the rim lock. These tires, the Duro tires, run perfectly fine at highway speed. They don't wobble, they don't shudder or nothing, they just go straight. But you need a good tire technician to put the wheels on properly, or you're gonna have problems. And then another thing on that is managed to make an adapter bracket right here that ties into one of the bolts on the fork there. And then it's cross braced with another one that goes up here and ties onto the handlebar. And there's this tied right there. And I tapped out the gas tank bolt right there for a 13 mil right there. Just bolts right through. Has a little spacer on it to bring it up a little. But this is an Italian matrix steering dampener. Works really good set around 14, and it's about where I'd use it, given how it's set up. And then on the other end of that bracket, there's a little mount right here I made for a Samsung S4 smartphone. So that works as a speedometer. And another thing with this engine here, they're supposed to have an oil tank on the front of them, which if you want to use the oil tank on the front of them, it's not going to fit on the frame. So the oil lines that come out the side of this thing, they run up in behind this skid plate made out of 16 gauge, and then it just goes to a power steering cooler. What's that? It's about a 16-inch or so power steering cooler. Goes up and then down. It's a single bend right at the top there. I had to melt the fender a little bit so it'd clear. But yeah, the function of the skid plate right here is just to stop the mud from building up on the fittings right there. And there's hose clamps and stuff there. Stop the mud from building up on those so they don't rust out as quick. And then another thing, just for convenience of just putting around and getting stuff done, you know, there's an extension welded onto this brake pedal right here. It's a good inch. Makes stopping pretty straightforward. You just put your foot down and brakes right there. You're not going to miss it. And then there's a bunch of metal that I welded onto this side of the foot peg right here, and that is a kickstand. That's a scrap leftover piece of 1/2-inch ready rod with a bunch of whatever welded on it to reinforce it, you know. 2 springs, a bent piece of brake line right there to hold the tops of the springs on. And now there's one of these fancy dancy aluminum racing shifters or whatever that folds over or whatever. It's Outlaw Racing Shifter is the brand name on that, I guess. But yeah. And then there the brake lever right here. Didn't have a spring on it when I got it because, you know, people just lose parts and stuff, and then they leave their whatever in the shed for a couple years, decade or so, drive it till it blows up, and then they just don't have money to fix it themselves or pay somebody either. So then the spring right here, that was out of a hood latch on a parts car. It came from a scrap heap that I got out back. And then there's a, to fit up the exhaust better, I made a clamp around it right there to kind of hold the fumes in it so it goes out. Then another thing about these freaking things is like the pipe on this muffler right here, it's about the same size as a normal 4-cylinder car, eh? So it's quite impressive, I'd say. And then the kick lever on it, I guess if somebody's really familiar with these bikes, they'd know that the kick lever on this thing is for the RMZ250 engine. It's not a kick lever for the Yamaha engine. This is a 2003 Yamaha engine, but it has a 2007 RMZ kickstart on it with a Dremel and some pressing and schmagels or shenanigans. The RMZ shifter, kickstart, fits on the Yamaha engine, but you gotta be careful because if you're swinging hammer on it to get it on, after drumming it a little bit, you pound out the back side of the case, which won't be good because then the case will be no good. But yeah, I'd have to say the suspension on this thing's pretty freaking soft. But you know, it's got the turning knobs on the top of it for compression adjustment or wherever the camera wants to focus or not. There it goes. Compression, hard, soft. And there's another adjustment for tension or whatever on the bottom right there. So the suspension on this Suzuki is actually really nice. If you soften it up, you can drive through the ditch on the side of the road full of molehills and potholes that are damn near about a foot deep, and the suspension on it just sucks it right up like it's not even there. And then if you turn it up so it's a bit stiffer, it'll make it so that it drives nice and smooth on the highway and won't bounce around or nothing. Just literally like driving a bicycle. And then I do have to say, if you get the turn signal that's this kind of style, like this one, these are not waterproof, so you need to put a bag or a condom over the switches there if it's raining out, if you're storing it outside. And then when I got this little signal indicator thing here, it came with a wiring diagram, but none of the wires were right for the diagram. So I'm assuming somebody that wired this up from the factory or whatever, production line, they might have been colorblind or just not cared, knowing that I was gonna get it. They'd know I'd fucking give a shit. I don't know. But the switch on this is fairly stiff, but if you're wearing gloves, it doesn't transfer the feel through it. And then this thing does have a Magura handlebar on it, but it has these generic branded lever shields, wind guards on it. Those came off Amazon. They're mass production, and managed to get these to fit on the Magura handlebars because they were not necessarily intended to be used on this kind of handlebar, but you know, I can make it fit if you work and know what you're doing. You can see different bolts and whatever right here with the puck that went in it fits. And then to get the brake lights and stuff to work on this thing, like, there's a pressure sensor right there, and there's another pressure sensor right here for the brakes. Those came off of Amazon. A lot of the pricings for the parts and stuff I got off of Amazon for this, like you can see the mirrors, the pressure switches, headlights, LED headlights, the switches, little buttons and stuff like that. The pricings on all that stuff, it fluctuates, so. And then a lot of the listings, like this charger right here, the battery maintainer for it, that's not available on Amazon anymore. But you know, there's other ones that are about the same size as this one that'll fit right up in behind right there, whatever. And then yeah. And then to get the battery in this thing, was listed as being for a 50cc quad. And the battery is right under the seat right here in front of the air filter. And to get that to fit, you can see there's a huge plastic grommet that I made out of scrap garbage can. That's a plastic grommet right there that I made out of a piece of broken garbage can that I melted into a plug to make a bracket inside of the air box for the battery to sit in. So I guess one of the recycled things on this thing is to make the little tray for the battery. I used a piece of broken garbage can and a heat gun, and I melted the plastic from the broken garbage can to make a little tray for the little battery to sit right there inside of the air box. And yeah, Like, might be able to see it inside there if I look in here. If it focuses, you can see the light through the other side, but that hard edge right there in the center of the screen, that is the battery. So, see, it's in there. And there's sorted wires and such. But it does not have an electric start, so you gotta be able to stand over it and give her the kick, eh? Then the compression on this thing is quite astonishing, I'd say. It's not like starting a lawnmower or nothing. But trick with starting these things, if it's got a really stiff compression on it, is you gotta turn it over till it is at the start of the exhaust stroke, and then from there you give it a good kick, and the momentum it picks up from kicking it from the start of the exhaust stroke is about enough to kick it over. Because if you try to kick it over starting at the compression stroke, it's never going to turn over. But yeah, 2003 YZ250F valve shoved up right inside of a 07 RMZ 250. I'm not sure, this is an old frame, but if that's a stalker right there, if they're supposed to be like that, I'm not sure, but that doesn't look normal to me. So try and replicate one of these, and the frame you got ain't like this one, and you're gonna have to get a fancy dancy guy that knows how to weld aluminum and stuff, which that gets expensive, because you need magic gas to do stuff like that. So yep, it's about a year of tinkering that has gotten this to where it is now. So it runs very nice, but the idle on it seems to stick around 38 to 40, 100 or so, unless the choke plunger's pulled out. The idle sticks up really high. And then if you're just going around, and it's got for the gearing on it, for fuel economy, it's got a 14 tooth on the front and a 38 on the back, and it's got a 19-inch wheel on the rear. So then for the fuel economy on that, just idling it around in third gear, it'll get about 40 miles a gallon. But then cruising it about 80, 90 kilometers an hour, that'll be maybe 50 miles an hour. 80, 90 kilometers an hour, 50 miles an hour in fifth gear. Not going heavy on the gas, just opening it enough to keep going that speed with the gearing it's got. This thing gets about 78 miles to the gallon. So running on 91 or 93, that's where I'm at. That stuff's about $1.20 a liter, which is about $4.50 a gallon. So 78 miles to the gallon on $4.50 a gallon. So fuel economy on this compared to the 1 ton over there, that thing will go through a gallon in less than 5 minutes, just sitting around, pissing around, doing fuck all. So this is pretty economic friendly compared to the other alternative. And then with the knobby tires on the rear, it gets around in foot deep snow pretty good. But you know, works great. According to the VIN number on this thing, this is an off-road motorcycle, but you know, according to the government standards, if you get in a 1920 built Model A, that's just as road legal as, if not more than that. But you know, if you actually look at the parts on it, and like, why would you want to drive that? Holy fuck. But yeah, getting the parts for these things, replacing parts for these things, if you have to go to a dealership and pay somebody to do it on top of buying the part from the dealership, charge a ludicrous amount of money just to get replacement parts for these things. Like for this little oil line right here, the dealership, they want $150 a piece for these damn oil lines. That's just some 3/8 goddamn line with a fucking thing on it. Like, recreational tax. Then you go to a dealership, you want to get a tire for one of these things. They look at the VIN number, they determine this is a recreational vehicle, not a road bike. Though I've done stuff to it, and that's all I use it for is road. Get a tire for this thing. They look at the VIN number and say, oh, it's a recreational bike. Tires are $680 a piece. But you know, if it's a road bike, tires are $30 a piece. As the fly lands on the plastic, stay warm. But yeah, if you're using one of these for on-road purposes, just to get around and do functional things, not just piss around and whatever, they have an absolute beneficial economic value for having one of these things because of the fuel economy on the 250cc engine. Right, like for the fuel economy on these things, it's stupid not to drive one of these if you're just going around town to pick up a burger. Talking about that, a lot of people in the McDonald's drive-through, holy fuck, drive a fucking 1-ton truck across town, burn 3 gallons of gas just to pick up a sandwich. Holy fuck.